Michigan Out of Doors Online is brought to you in part by Tri-County Logging. Experienced in sustainable forestry practices, Tri-County Logging can help you manage your property by keeping your woods healthy and generate income. Serving southern and mid-Michigan for nearly 50 years, TriCountyLogging.com. Well, everybody, welcome to Michigan Out of Doors. We are going to do something on this week's show that we haven't done for several years now, and that is bring you a big buck night. That's right, we're going to have Big Buck Night East from OUTOF down there in Novi from just a few weeks ago. A lot of big deer, a lot of big stories. You stay tuned. I'm Jimmy Gretzinger. It's time for Michigan Out of Doors.
From the first spring rains to the soft summer breeze, dancing on the pine forest floor, the autumn colors catch your eyes. Here come the crystal winter skies. It's Michigan, Michigan out of doors.
What a beautiful day in the woods.
Someday our children all will see this is their finest legacy, the wonder and the love of Michigan. As the wind comes whispering through the trees, the sweet smell of nature's in the air. From the Great Lakes to the quiet stream, shining like a sportsman's dream, it's a love of Michigan we all share.
Michigan Out of Doors is presented by Country Smokehouse, a sportsman's meat processor and Michigan destination since 1988. Offers a variety of homemade smoked meats and Michigan-made products in-store and online. The Country Smokehouse features an outdoor barbecue and bar. Details at countrysmokehouse.com. By Greenmark Equipment. Greenmark Equipment is a John Deere dealership network in southwest Michigan and northern Indiana. Greenmark provides sales and services to farmers, commercial businesses, large property owners, and homeowners. Information about pricing and products available can be found online at greenmarkequipment.com. By Angler Quest Pontoons. Angler Quest is a Michigan-based company building boats designed for comfort and fishing functionality. For more information about the 2022 models, anglerquestpontoons.com. By Polarcraft Boats, offering riveted and welded boats for the outdoor enthusiast. Whether you're targeting fish or waterfowl, Polarcraft Boats have several models to choose from that keep you high and dry. For more information, polarcraft.com.
It feels good to be back at Outdoorama 2022. The last time we were here was 2 years ago. 2020 was our very last buck night anywhere east or west. And one of the big buck participants in 2020 here at Outdoorama was Jack Lawson, who's back again. So I think this is the first time we've had a back-to-back participant, even though we missed a couple of years. It's technically back-to-back. So Jack's got his 13-point buck from LENAWEE County, shot with a .450 Bushmaster, and he scores 148 inches gross score on November 19th. Welcome back, Jack.
It's great to be back, Jenny. Thanks, everyone. Thanks for joining. It's been a blast actually being a part of the program here for 2 years ago and now, but it's even more of a blast when you have to drag these out of the woods. So, but this was a pleasure. We actually hunt on a 160-acre farm that's actually, you might say, sponsored by Greenstone. But we ended up seeing him for the first time, and we saw him 4 days into the season, and he came out, and he was only about 60 yards away. We hit him with a .450 Bushmaster. He ran about 60 yards, right in the food plot, and fell over, so the tracking was pretty easy. For the audience out there, you just got to have a little extra patience, because they will get big, and the bunch behind us here will prove it. There's just some monsters here tonight.
My brother set for 30 hunts and called me and said, I'm going out tonight. I'm shooting the first deer I see. Called me a couple hours later. Come on, help me. I shot a little 8-point. It's okay, I'm on my way. 15 minutes later, he calls me and says, bring help. This one walked in, tried to spar with the one he shot, so he shot this one.
So you shot them both the same night, same blind?
15 minutes apart. They died 10 yards apart.
And where in Wayne County are you hunting at?
Over there.
So this is now same blind, fast forward.
Fast forward, November 26th. I called him, what are you doing? He said, I got to work late. I said, guess I'm going to hunt your blind. He said, don't go near my blind. Not a problem. Snuck into his blind. 2 does in the field. They take off running. I reach down to grab my water. I look up, and this guy's standing out there.
How far?
25 yards. Put the 350 on him, and down he went.
Now, did you have time to see how big it really was?
No idea.
I have actually been watching this buck from a field about a mile away from us for 2 years now. I have tons of photos of him in velvet. We used to call him the beast from the buck field, and my son would actually get tired of me stopping to take his picture. So my dad was a deer processor in Wayne County, and he passed away in 2013. So I have been like, Dad, send me the beast from the buck field. I've been praying to my dad to send me this buck for 2 years. And December 2nd, we get up, and we're getting ready for school, and they're like, there's a shooter buck in the backyard. He came in with a hot doe, and I didn't know he was the beast from the buck field, so I told Wyatt, don't move, don't make a sound, be frozen like a statue, and if you clink your spoon on your cereal bowl, you're gonna be in big trouble. And to Wyatt's credit, that is the stillest and quietest I have ever seen him sit. So I picked up my crossbow, slid open the door. The does are used to us moving curtains around, so, he looked, but they went right back to eating, and so did he. And I shot him Dad gift wrapped him for me. He really did. His dressed weight was 288 pounds.
I took this deer November 11th of last year, and my grandpa actually had passed away in September. And that has been I've been at this for 9 years with him. And so it was just strange. And when I give my boyfriend credit, he goes, well, why don't we just go? Why don't we just go? And I'm like, I don't know. Well, we went, and it was so cool. We got there. There were some bucks tussling about probably 50 yards in front of us. And then, poor man, he goes, look across the field. I'm like, okay. And he goes, big buck. And he goes, are you going to take it or should I? Oh, he was so sweet. He let me do it. Boyfriend of the Year award. Nice. And so he comes strutting across the field and stops about 113 yards out. And it was a clean, double lung shot. Couldn't have asked for anything better.
Now, have you shot bucks this big before?
No.
How many bucks have you shot?
This would be my second.
Well, I shot it with a 20 gauge shotgun. It was a 5-point buck, my first buck ever shot, and that's all I know about it.
Well, that's all you need to know. That's awesome. Very cool. All right. Well, Abigail was hunting in Clinton Township when she shot her beautiful 10-point here, scored 162 and 5/8. You shot it with a 450 Bushmaster? Okay. And you said you were kind of pouting before you went out there that day. What day was it?
It was November 28th, and I was totally pouting. I was late getting out to my stand because I had company show up, and ended up having my nieces out being teenagers talking in the field. And I said, where were you guys out at? And they said, not by your stand. I said, okay, all right. Well, I go walking out there. We just had fresh snow, and they were right by my stand, about 75 yards from it, just having girl talk. And sure enough, I climb up there. I'm still pouting. I move the seat and knock off my snow from it, and I'm being quiet, but I didn't look when I got in my stand. I always look around and make sure there's no deer, and I didn't because I was busy pouting. And so I sat down, and as I'm sitting down with my gun, I look over, and there's this 6-point buck standing there staring at me, and I'm like, oh, man. And as I'm taking pictures, all of a sudden, about 30 yards behind him, behind a tree, another tree moves, and it was this buck. I waited just a couple minutes. It felt like a good half an hour, but it was just a couple minutes. And he turned around and stood broadside in a perfect clearing and about 90 yards. And I took the shot, and I thought, well, shoot, I got him.
This is my my version of, I'd like to think, what happens. I lost a son back in, I say last year, but it'd be 2020 now, and after an 8-month battle with leukemia. And through all that, I've met a wonderful person I sold my house, and we were looking for a house together. We found a house. One of the first times we walked through the house and came back up and was finished, we came to the living room area where kind of look out, and there's a doe standing right next to our vehicles, like in the roundabout. So I went out to get a closer look, and when I got out there, there's a 6-point standing in front of this garage. And I'm like, man, this is looking pretty good for deer hunting. So
it's like a sign from up above.
it's a sign, kind of, yeah. And, obviously she's very concerned about the house, and I'll sleep in the garage. I'm more concerned with, I still have a place to hunt. I got down a little farther, and off to the right side, there's a garage down there. I'm 99% sure it was this deer. We made eye contact, and when I realized what I was looking at, we locked eyes, and I seen these tines. He was in a pile of brush, about 60 yards away, so I had a good view of him. Anyway, long story short, I ended up throwing a tent pop-up blind up, 20 yards from the corner of the house next to a pine tree. Nice. It ended up being December 3rd, opening day of muzzleloader. It was like 15 minutes before dark. I seen this side of the deer walking through the swamp grass at the creek where I first got the picture. And I don't want to say it was easy, but he came out 60 yards away, stood there, and he was in swamp grass. Shot him in the neck and dropped him. And that's my kind of roundabout story of I think my son just helped me out here.
So my nephew, he's right there, thank you, my guide, started seeing some nice bucks on some state land, and I was not seeing nice bucks on state land where I was hunting, and he's like, hey, come out with me. I'm like, heck yeah, let's do it. Opening day, he takes a private land spot and says, hey, just go out there, you'll find a spot. And I'm like, oh my gosh, I have never been on this property before in my life. So I just picked an open spot and said, okay, let's go for it. And at 7:05 in the morning, a nice 7-point came out. He was all the way across the field, and I shot him with a 350 Legend. Came out to be a nice piebald buck. So that was fantastic on state land. I was perfectly happy all day. And finally, my nephew come up to me in the afternoon and said, hey, let's see the buck. And so I showed him, and I'm like, hey, what's over that way? And he's like, swamp, thickets, right up your alley. I'm like, awesome. I'm gonna go for a couple-hour walk. Let's see if I can push something to you. And I played the wind and went down in the swamp, and I seen a nice big 8-point come up to me, and I almost pulled the trigger on him, and right about what time I was gonna pull the trigger on him, I see a flash of this guy behind him, and I just seen it. It was the biggest thing I'd ever seen before in my life with my scope, and he went behind 2 oak trees, and the second he stepped out, I pulled the trigger, did about a 100-yard track job on him, even though it was a perfect shot. He could handle the 350 Legend, but it did him in, and then come up on this guy. And thank you, Lord. It was just a great day, so it was awesome.
Well, my husband actually sat out that morning to hunt, and I'm not much of a morning person, so I slept in. And I woke up to my phone just filled with text messages and like missed calls, and he's like, there's a giant monster right here, you have to come check it out. And it was kind of late in the morning, and there were cars pulling up honking at this buck, so we're like, all right, not the chance. So for sure sitting out that night. We're sitting out, passed on, I think it was like 8 doe and a 6-point. My husband's like, you're not gonna shoot that 6-point? I'm like, I just have a feeling. I have a gut feeling that it's gonna come out. And lo and behold, it comes through the wood line, chasing a doe, of course. And we were in the blind, and I was panicking because he couldn't see it where he was sitting, but I could see it. And he's like, I can't get a range on it. And I was like, I don't care. Swear words might have been said, but I said, I don't care what you have to do. Just tell me how far it is so I can make a good shot. And so finally we rearranged everything in the blind. He got a range and shot it, double lung, dropped 30 yards, and he actually played a little prank on me, and he's like, I think you shot the doe, because I started panicking. And I was like, no, I didn't. He's like, I'm pretty sure you did. And then I didn't have my glasses, so I couldn't see. So once I got close enough, I was like, yep, nope, I got the buck. And it was just, very overwhelming day.
We've been seeing him since 2019 in December. He showed up on the camera late in December, and we had some good pictures of him in 20, and we had some early pictures of him last year in 21, and then Didn't see him at all anymore until Halloween in the rain at 8 o'clock in the morning. He showed up on the camera. And I was sitting in a different blind in the morning because we had obviously a lot of rain through the fall. It was a muddy mess, and the farmer got just enough corn cut so I could sit the other stand in the afternoon. So I walked over and sat in my original stand where I should have been sitting all day, but the last 7 minutes of light, I just saw a big deer come out of the hedgerow, and I saw his neck, and it was like chest to chin. He was just huge. And so I ranged him quickly, got a 165-yard range on him. And
So you did not know it was the buck that you had on camera?
I didn't know it was this one. We had nicknamed him Tank after seeing him all the years. And so I shot him, got down, got out to where I thought he would have been, and I came upon a spot where it looked like somebody drove a four-wheeler into the standing corn. I said, well, this has got to be something. And I walked in about 20 yards and found him, and my buddy Eric, who's here with me tonight, hunts the farm with me. He says all I was doing was screaming. I was on the radio. I thought I was just very calm, but apparently not. So, yeah, biggest buck of my life.
So I shot this buck November 2nd, and the year prior we actually got an encounter with him where he popped out of the woods and we were walking, and my dad saw him, and he was just unbelief, biggest buck we've had on our property for a while. So the year comes, and November 2nd comes, and I'm sitting there all day in the one stand, and it's time to get down, so I'm getting ready to get down, and I see it into the field, I'm 20 yards from a field, and I see these two deer coming towards me, and I'm like, oh man, here we go. And he walked in first, and I couldn't tell how big he was. I couldn't tell what it was. I just knew he was big. I could see the foundation of his rack and his frame, and I knew he was big. And he stepped in first, 15 yards broadside. I took the shot. He kicked like a mule, took off running. Called my dad in the stand, get over here. He's out hunting. I'm like, get over here. We got a deer to go catch and look for. And by the time my dad got there, it was dark. Couldn't see anything, but the arrow had good blood on it. Good fletchings were just full of blood. We looked for about 20 minutes, didn't push him too far into the woods. We decided to call it for the night, came back the next morning, found him 70 yards away, and just a Michigan monster here. Just so excited.
10 o'clock, I see some deer running. I hit the grunt, and out of nowhere, here comes this big, wide 10-point. Stops 40 yards for a chip shot, and I'm thinking, oh, this is easy. So pull the trigger, click. Nothing happened. As soon as I rack another bullet in, that deer was hightailing it. So the whole day I never seen another deer. I'm like, oh, I blew my chance. This is it. And my nephew, you'll get a bigger one the next day. I'm thinking, probably not. And the next day they were calling for a storm front, pretty good storm front. And I sat in the same spot at 8 o'clock. I looked behind me and there's a herd of doe, probably 50, 60 deer. And in the middle of the herd's this guy, 106 yards out, broadside. So I set my gun on the shooting sticks. I let him walk into the scope, pull the trigger, dropped right in his tracks.
Well, that is amazing. So then you call your nephew and said you were right?
I texted him, bleep, bleep, shot a monster. He walked up and we celebrated.
So I started off October 26th. Me and my dad went out. He went to one side of the property, I went to the other. And I was just sitting there, had a doe come out. She was like 5 yards. And she was straight up wind from me, and it was 10 minutes went by. She's right under me. I took some of my VS1, rubbed it right on the tree, and straight downwind from me, I heard a grunt. And about, I don't know, what felt like 10 minutes, probably 30 seconds, he stepped out. And so I had this buck on camera and this other 11-point on camera that we've been watching for 2 to 3 years. Well, this one for 3 and the other one for 2. And he stepped out. I saw 4 tines and a split brow, and I was like, okay, that's the buck I know. So he came up, he followed up to that doe, and I shot him at 5 yards.
You already have a good year right there, and what happened a few weeks later?
Yeah. So opening day of gun, I was sitting with my grandpa out there in the crowd, and the afternoon came, and my uncle that was sitting on the other side of the farm, he was way on the end. My dad was in the middle, and I was on the end. Shot a doe, and then all of a sudden I just see tails and horns just running through the woods, which was just crazy to see. And my dad actually jumped out of the blind and tried scoping him, never got a shot, and he ran up to me at like 50 yards. And
So your dad was in a different blind?
Yep, he was in a different blind. I was with my grandpa.
Why did he jump out of the blind?
Because he had no shot. He had a door right there, so he jumped up, rested on the tree, and so he ran right to the bottom of this ridge I was at, hit the brakes after this doe, turned back around, ran up the ridge, and the only shot I had was resting the 450 on my grandpa's shoulder, and I let it rip.
You probably can't hear anyways.
Exactly.
We just happened to be leaving, getting ready in the morning and going to school, drop my son off, and open up the curtains, and he's like, "Oh my God, there's this monster outside." And I'm like, "Son, you're going in late."
So the buck was right in the backyard.
He was actually, he was out a ways, at least 140 yards, but he was so big and, you could see him. It was crazy. And so, of course, I look at him and I'm thinking, who's going to go get their gun first? And so I'm like,
pretty hard not to get mine, I'll tell you.
But he had already shot 2 good ones, like big ones this year. So I'm like, I'm going to get my gun. It's my turn. So we go outside and, we didn't have a lot of space to really, creep up on him because he was going to run, we would think. And so we watched and we waited and we got on a belly and started crawling in. And he's like, "I've only ranged you at 100 yards. You can't shoot him. He's 140 yards. I'm like, "I got him. Just let me shoot him."
She was confident. She was confident.
But so he kind of started moving in a little bit, and he got 130 yards. And I looked at him. I'm like, "I really have him. Just let me take the shot." I took the shot, hit him right behind the shoulder, did a huge donkey kick, and it was great. It was exciting, and
Now, is this the first buck you've ever shot?
first buck I've ever shot. Yes,
First shot
I know. Apparently, I'm ruined. I know.
First shot at a deer.
Well, I had 2 does in the food plot. I had them on camera that morning, and it was October 9th, and it was 85 degrees outside. So I texted my buddy, texted the fiance. I'm like, "I don't know if I'm going to go out tonight." And they're both like, "Oh, go out, go out, go out." Went out. Right before dark, I seen a body moving through the woods in the brush, and texted my dad, and I said, "Hey, get ready, come help track, a buck's coming." He stepped out at 20 yards. I was in my ground blind. Shot him right at dark, and he ran 50 yards, and that was it.
Good. Did you have time to get nervous? Because you knew it was that big.
He stopped for probably 10, 15 seconds until I could shoot, so.
So what happened? So you take the shot, and what happened after that?
Oh, I called the fiance about 15 times, and she was making dinner and didn't answer, so I called my dad. My dad and my stepmom were on their way out, and we ended up tracking it. My sister and brother-in-law came out, and that was the end of the story.
Just walking back this fence row in this corn edge, and all of a sudden I see this huge sign. Like the sign like you normally don't see. Just huge rubs, bunch of scrapes. October 5th, like, what's going on here? So guess what I did? Went back to work for a little bit. Went and got my stand, hang, and hunt. And that's what I did, and it was probably about, it was early. I had 3 does come in right away, eating acorns right underneath me, and I was pretty much pinned down. It seemed like forever. You couldn't move, couldn't do nothing. They're just sitting there real close, like 10 feet away, and all of a sudden they lifted up. Oh, what's going on? Something's happening. I look, I'm like, oh, that's a shooter. Grab my binoculars. Yep, shooter. What? Grab my binoculars again, going, what is that? I'm going, holy moly. So, yeah, okay, here it comes. It's coming. And I normally don't want to try to stop mature deer. When you try to and they're real close, I just try not to. But this one was like, I got to get an arrow in them. I got to get an arrow in them. So guess what I did? It took off. I was like, oh my gosh. It only went about maybe 7, 8 yards, but at that time it felt like a long ways. And now he was at like 23 yards, quartering away pretty good, pretty severe. Found my pen, buckled down, put it right where I wanted to, but at the time I did not know. So did the mule kick, saw it take off, heard it, go, 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 and then stop. Well, we kind of followed them. We found a little bit of blood, a little bit of hair, and all of a sudden my old man's like, "Does he got stuff everywhere?" I'm like, "Yeah." And it's like, "Yeah." And it just came up to him. It was like unbelievable.
Thanks to everyone that made Big Buck Night so special. Stay tuned next week where we'll have Big Buck Night West from Grand Rapids.
Michigan Out of Doors is presented by.
Do you dream of somewhere bigger than your backyard? You can get there with Greenstone. Whether you want to hunt, fish, hike, or just watch the sunset, we're ready to help you own your place in the great outdoors. To learn more, visit greenstonefcs.com.
By Alta Equipment Company, providing sales, rentals, service, and parts because uptime matters. From earth moving to landscaping and light construction, Alta offers over 50 brands across 7 Michigan locations to serve you. More information online or 844-GO-2-ALTA. By RBM Jigs, a Michigan-based company serving ice fishing anglers around the state and throughout the country. Specializing in ice fishing gear, RBM Jigs manufactures tungsten jigs, soft plastics, and much more. Online at lakeeffectlures.com.
Closed captioning provided by Marvo Mineral, makers of Lucky Buck, deer management products including minerals to supplement deer diets year-round to improve health and antler growth.
When I wander far away, a dream stays with me night and day. It's the road that leads to my home state. I am a Michigan man. Changing seasons paint the scene like rainbow trout in a hidden stream. The white-tailed deer in the tall pine trees. I am a Michigan man. I am a Michigan man. Ask where I'm from and I'll show you my hands. Lord above